Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadagya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Swarupa Lakshana. Lakshana, definition, as opposed to an adjective. The purpose of the adjective, just to continue from where we left off, is to distinguish things within its own class. To put it in Sanskrit, just for fun, Svajatiyebhyah Vishayebhyah Vyavartakam Visheshanam. So among the trees, this tree is a tall tree. This is a tall is an adjective to tree, so that we can distinguish it from other trees. But we can't have an adjective for Brahman. Why? Simple. The reason is very simple, because there's only one Brahman. You don't have to distinguish it from, fat Brahman, thin Brahman, tall Brahman, or even Atma, which is the same thing, tall Atma, fat Atma, thin Atma, cranky Atma. That is all not there. Happy Atma, cranky Atma, complaining Atma, sleeping Atma, waking Atma. No. There's only one I, which we have talked about in the last so many sessions. So if there is only one, it doesn't need any kind of adjectival words. And yet we are in a very interesting situation. It cannot be objectified. So how to describe something that cannot be objectified? Should we come to the conclusion, the wrong conclusion, that it must not exist, as many people have done, many philosophers have done? Shunyavadins, many philosophers think that, okay, if I cannot describe it, if I cannot catch hold of it, if the sense organs cannot objectify it, it must not be there. Well, I wish that were the case, because it would make life a lot easier, But that is not the case. How do you know? Because the one that is denying the I is very much existing. In order to deny, you need a conscious being who is the denier of the I. How are you going to deny that you exist with a straight face? You cannot. That is what we mean by self-evident. So this is something which is very interesting. So it is there, but it is not an object. Oh no, how do I understand it? Maybe I cannot understand it at all. Or, as is frequently talked about, maybe I have to experience Brahman. People say this all the time. How to experience Brahman? Asks the one who is experiencing Brahman all the time. This is illustrated through a very hilarious story that happened in the life of my teacher. He was catching a small plane from this place, the capital of India, Delhi, to go to Rishikesh, and it is a short flight. The plane doesn't fly to Rishikesh, but it goes to a small little airport called Dehradun. So he was on this half an hour tiny flight. Sitting next to him was a huge man, very big man, from Germany. And the poor teacher was plastered to the window because the man took up 1.5 seats and the teacher was sitting in the half of a seat. And of course they fell into the conversation. And then he took out his notes from his diary. He says, you look like a Swami. Are you a Swami? And Swamiji said, yes, I am a Swami. Perhaps you know this other Swami. I really want to study with him. And he took out his diary. This was, a story from the 70s. He took out his diary and he showed, and on that was written my teacher's name, Swami Dayananda. So, you see, this is a very interesting situation. He was experiencing Swamiji right there and then. And whether he was experiencing my teacher or not, my teacher was physically experiencing him very much by being pushed towards the window. And then what? And then it was for the lack of knowledge. Experience is as good as what you can make out of it. And if Brahman is an experience that one craves for, then it will become finite. It will become something like everything else in the world that comes and goes. Then you can proudly tell your friends, I had moksha for half an hour. Is that enough to be free for half an hour? You can just go to sleep and have moksha for 8 hours. What's the problem? No problem at all. I had moksha for half an hour yesterday. That will be our bragging rights. That's all. But is that enough? No. So it's not a question of trying to experience it, because the experienced, what you experience is Brahman. And like for example, if you are having chocolate cake non-separate from Brahman, eater of the chocolate cake non-separate from Brahman, and the nostrils that bring the information, aha, this must be chocolate cake, also Brahman. In other words, the means of knowledge, the knower and the known, all three are Brahman. And so what is this Brahman? What is this Atma? That which is neither the eater nor the eaten nor the means of eating, tongue, nose, etc., nor the means of tasting. That is where we have that limitlessness. So therefore, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, the person of knowledge sings, Ahamannam, 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 Ahamannado, Ahamannado, Ahamannadaha. So the person of knowledge sings in ecstasy. And what is the song? I am the food, I am the food. Oh, then you will be eaten. No, I am also the eater of the food. Aham annadaha, aham annam and aham annadaha. This is what the truth is. So Brahman cannot be something that is experienced as a special experience. If you want to continue with this series, I suggest you drop the penchant for the special experience of having Brahman, and then the breakthrough will be much more if you are able to drop that, because it is not a special experience. Because if it is anything that is what is an experience by definition? By definition, an experience is that which you get into and that which you come out of. That's what it is. An experience is forever finite, but what you want is the forever, not the finite. And so therefore, this is the I, that is the content and the truth of all experiences without anything. But how to know this I? Because it is not something that's available in the market. It is not something that is plastered on a billboard. And it is not something that you can just sit and intuit. Who am I? Who am I? The answer that will come is idiot. Definitely, because that is what one thinks of oneself ultimately before Vedanta. So where to go with this? How to go beyond this impasse? How to go beyond this impasse? And that is why the Upanishad uses the metaphor of honey, that sweetness. Because that sweetness is understood by all. But then the sweetness is also finite. And it is craved by all. That is why this is used. So therefore, since there is only one I, which happens to be Brahman, there is no adjectives possible. Because an adjective, by definition, you have to have the similar species and you have to distinguish it from something else. Here there is only one of a kind. So then how do we know it? Very interesting pedagogy here. We know Brahman through lakshana, definition. And what is the definition of the word definition in Sanskrit? Sarvebhyah vishayebhyah vyavartakam lakshanam. That which distinguishes it from everything else is called definition, lakshana. So we gave an example earlier of the adjective. Bring me the big blue, fragrant lotus. This is Visheshana, adjective. But if you are talking of Lakshana, this should be only only one thing. Like for example, Rama. So Rama, there is only one Rama, Lord Rama. And then what? Then this Lord Rama has many names. Dasharathihi. Dasharathihi means son of Dasharatha. And it's all pointing to that same Rama. Kodanda Panihi, the one who wields the bow called Kodanda on in his hands. Kodanda Panihi. Then what? Janaki Vallabha, the delight of Sita, the delight of Mother Sita. And then we know it is, all of them are referring to that same thing, that same person. So the definition works like that. There is no need to distinguish Rama from other Ramas. This is here defining Rama. And so the definition here works exactly in the same manner. Because what kind of examples can we use? Because nothing is like Brahman. How are you going to compare it? You know, at least Shakespeare could say to somebody, he was writing a sonnet, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" he said. But here, there is nothing to compare to. Even the Vedanta poets are at their wits' end, because all they can find is the sun, sun-like. We saw that, Tejo Maya. Or like space. We have exhausted both the metaphors. But again, space, sun, etc. are still, so to speak, projections, manifestations of this Atma, of this Brahman. And so how to know Brahman? And that's why we have what is called Swarupa Lakshana, a definition that is intrinsic to Brahman, to Atma, without which Brahman, Atma, which is the same thing, this Brahmatma cannot be without. And so that intrinsic definition is in the words that we have seen, Satyam Jnanam Anantam, aka Sat Chit Ananda. This is what the whole thing is. Sat Chit Ananda. And so this Sat Chit Ananda, we can write it down in our notebook. Sat, existence, Chit, awareness, Ananda, limitlessness. But the definition works in a very interesting way. The definition is not a direct definition, because if it were a direct definition, it would be like defining apple or orange. Apple red in color, and these kinds of seeds, and this kind of it has something called pectin, which many fruits have, all these things. Then it becomes a very different kind of it becomes an object. How to define that which is you? Thankfully, you are self-evident. So the definition is not needed in the same way as defining an apple or orange, or anything that you use in the universe. So the definition is a very unique definition where indicatory words are used. Words that indicate Brahman, that indicate you, a conscious being. Yeah, that's me. The one that exists, yes. The one that is limitless. Okay, that's a stretch. But okay, since the Upanishad is saying it, I'll give it the benefit of doubt. So like this we operate. We operate in this manner, and then since the I is self-revealing, these definitions lead one to the I. After dropping the things that are connected to the I on account of ignorance. I am the doer, I am the done in, I am guilty, I am hurty, I don't have this, I don't have that. All this is dropped. This is how the teaching operates. Certain things are given up and certain things are retained. So it is a very interesting deployment of this Lakshana. Jahat and Ajahat Lakshana. Ajahat means some things are retained. Like Satyam, existence. The abstract nature of existence is retained. And then something is given up. Existence and its time-boundedness is given up. The time-bound nature of existence that we are familiar with, that existence which is framed by time and space, in our orientation, that time and space is given up, existence in the abstract way is retained. Jnanam, knowledge, awareness. So the concept of knower given up, concept of known, knower, that difference is given up, and that knowledge is retained. The knowledge which morphs into knower and morphs into known, that awareness which informs the knower and informs the known, which lights up the object and lights up the subject as the knower, is that same one which is neither object nor subject. So how beautiful. So that's why the word Ananta, limitless, knocks off the finitude from the very words that we know. Because what other words can we use to describe Brahman? Those are the only words to use. And from the words we know, the limitations are given up. They are dropped. This is how one understands the I, the Atma. This is how one understands. Otherwise, there is no other way to understand it. In fact, the understanding of the I is not difficult at all. If there is a prepared mind, a mind that is readied by sadhana, then it is very easy. Sukha pratipatti means easy understanding and assimilation takes place. It is not difficult. And it is not difficult. If the mind is prepared, it goes in very easily. In fact, Brahman, what we call you, the I, is the only thing whose knowledge can be given completely in full. I can communicate to you who you are completely without anything being left behind. Whereas anything else in the universe, I cannot communicate fully. Like even what is sweet. If supposing somebody from outer space came and then they said, we don't know, I am Atma, Madhu. What is honey? Madhu, honey. What is honey? Well, it is sweet. What is sweet? You cannot communicate it through words. But if the person from another planet, so long as I could communicate with them, asked, what is I can communicate even with them. That is the beauty of it. And therefore, the Madhuvidya portion starts with the exposition of Swarupa Lakshana of Brahman. And we saw how beautifully the words, the Purusha is used twice. The first Purusha is what? This miserable Jiva, jaded, faded Jiva, living in this body, mind, sense complex, complaining all the time, whining and crying, and all the time saying, I am not enough, sleeping the sleep of ignorance, self-ignorance. And the other Purusha, which we know as Bhagavan, Sahasrashirsha Purusha, the Purusha with 1,000 heads. The Purusha Sukta talks about this. Sahasrakshas Sahasrapat, the one who has 1,000 eyes, so 1,000 feet. So the one that is the cosmic, Bhagavan. And that Purusha and this miserable Purusha obtaining in the body, mind, sense complex, Ekaha, one, non-dually one. And why? Because that Purusha which obtains in the body, mind, sense complex, layered and slathered with self-ignorance, slimed with self-ignorance, complains and needs to take a bath in the waters of Ganga knowledge, and then what? And then understands that all that needs to be given up are these very complaints. When the complaints are completely neutralized in the wake of self-knowledge with the help of the Shastra and the teacher, then what happens? Then this Purusha is gone. There is only one Purusha, and which is Bhagavan. That is why the word Purusha is here repeated twice, because the first Purusha of our finite understanding is the finite Jiva crying all the time. It's like there is a musical refrain. I want, I want, I want, I want. Why me, why me, why me, why me? I don't have, I don't have, I don't have, I don't have. Give me, give me, give me. Depending on the day. The tune is, one of these tunes are always there. And then, and therefore, this Purusha, the one that is as though trapped in this body, mind, sense complex, is not trapped at all. Satya, that is also Satyam Jnanam Anantam. The complaining Purusha is Satyam Jnanam Anantam. And then Bhagavan with this Purusha, Brahman, that which is the Satyam Jnanam Anantam, that is all pervasive, all knowledge, not confined to a single body, mind, sense complex. That is what is called Brahman. From the word Brih. Same thing in the word Brihadaranyaka also. That same Brih. Brih means Vriddhau, that which is big. How big? Limitlessly big. Limitlessly big. And then, so this is all something which is to be understood. And then the second last line says, Ayameva saha yo ayam atma idam amritam. Ayameva saha. So that Brahman which you adore, which you think is so far away from you, is indeed this Atma, this I, that is complaining, that is having all kinds of complexes centered on itself. And then what? Idam Brahma, last line, Idagam Sarvam. All this is what is known as Brahman. This I alone, this I am Atma is alone. This I alone is that Brahman which you crave for, which you want to know, which you feel like you don't experience. And then, so therefore, that is what is you. This is what is called the unfoldment of the nature of Brahman and the nature of the Jiva. So so this is an intrinsic to oneself. When Jivatvam, the Jivaness of this individual is unpacked, what you get is Satchit Ananda. And that Satchit Ananda is the truth of Bhagavan as well, which is what is going to be told in the next mantra. Very, very beautiful. So this Satchidananda, which obtains in this body, mind, sense complex as though, which informs this, indwells this body, mind, sense complex, is that same existence, is not separate, is the same thing, that is the source of all existence, that's the source of all knowledge, all pervasive. This is Brahman. The teaching cannot stop here. Why? The teaching cannot stop here simply because it is incomplete. The problems of the Jiva are not because one doesn't know I am not just this body, mind, sense complex. Because somehow that one already knows, as I addressed in the very first class. So somehow one knows I am much more than this body. And even though I have a mind about which I can at best say, never mind, I'm still something else. Somehow one senses this. One has this understanding. But for this understanding, you don't need to go to a teacher or an ashram. This is already understood in a certain way. That there is something there within me that is, that observes the body, that can observe the mind, that can objectify the senses, that is already there. The Upanishad, in revealing this definition, clinches this understanding, which was a vague kind of a sense to begin with. But it's not the whole story. Why is it not the whole story? The problems of the Jiva are not because they don't know that they are Brahman. if you know you are Brahman, it doesn't help, because the problem is the separation from the source of oneself, which is what? Which is Ishvara. So Satchidananda is a good step, because at least one stops crying momentarily, because one says, oh, okay, I'm not this, I am Satchidananda. Very nice. It's a good beginning. But it's not the whole story. It cannot be. Because the alienation, the anger, the fear, the loneliness is all directed at the source of the universe, Ishvara. That is where the distance is. That is where the craving is. That is where the disconnect is. That is where the vagueness, doubts and mistakes are. And that's why we need another kind of definition of this Brahman, which has taken the form of the Lord, invested with the power to create. And as I said, what can you create other than confusion? There's already a distance. And then the power to sustain. What can we sustain in this miserable body, mind, sense complex? Perhaps wrong notions about the self. That can be sustained. That's all that can be sustained. The power to take back. We don't even seem to have that ability to take back even our own words uttered impulsively. One is loath to apologize. And so this entity, this conscious entity, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam, which is Satchidananda, but Satchidananda plus. Satchidananda plus what? Yes, Satchidananda plus cannot be anything else other than Satchidananda, because I thought you said Satchidananda is infinite. Yes, it is infinite. So it's a as though plus. So the plus sign is as though, and what comes after the plus sign is also as though. What comes after the plus sign? Satchidananda plus all knowledge, Satchidananda of plus all power, Satchidananda plus samarthya, the ability to create, sustain and take back the universe, Satchidananda plus all resources, Samagra Shrihi, Satchidananda plus the power over lordship, Aishwaryam. Satchidananda, as I said, all knowledge, Jnanam. These are, Satchidananda plus complete Vairagya. Vairagya means absolute dispassion, objectivity. This is what makes Bhagavan. This Satchidananda now has quote unquote, many quotes, okay? Quote unquote become Bhagavan. These are the 6 bhagas that I just described. Bhaga means auspicious. And here, immeasurably, these powers are wielded by this Satchidananda on the one side of this equation, Tat side, and on the Tvam side, on this Jiva side, what powers are there? No powers. No powers. Only the power to cry is there. Because of the veiling power of Maya, and I always call it the wailing power of Maya, because it makes the Jiva wail. That is what it is. And so therefore, the one definition, even though it's a nice swimmy feeling, I am Satchidananda, everything is nice, it is not enough to remove Atma Ajnanam. We are there part of the way, the other half still remains to assimilate. So what shall we do? We shall read the second mantra, we shall read further. Sava ayam atma sarvesham adhipatihi sarvesham bhutanagam raja tadyatha rathanabhau cha rathanemau cha araha sarve samarpitaha evamev asmin atmani sarvani bhutani sarve devaha sarve lokaha sarve pranaha sarve ete atmanah samarpitaha. Very nice. So Sava, indeed, Savai, indeed, this I am Atma. This Atma, which Atma? Prakritam, which is under discussion. What was under discussion? You. How can you forget that you are the one who is under discussion? You. Oh, me? It's like sometimes, in a crowd of people, they call out your name and say, come here, and you cannot believe you're being singled out. You've won this prize. You have won the bingo or the lottery, something. So the first idea that goes in the mind is to look behind. Maybe it's the person behind that's being called, not me. No, no, you. Sava, Savai, indeed. That Atma, which Atma? This Atma, which is what? You. This Atma, which is you. Oh, me? Yes. Oh, so what am I? Sarvesham Adhipatihi, the overlord of all. No, 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 there must be some mistake. How can I be the overlord of all? No one even listens to me, even in my own house. So how can I be the overlord of all? Not possible. Even in my own house, I am not famous. I am not listened to. My opinions don't make a difference. How can you say that I am the overlord of all? And that will be explained later. And then what? Sarvesham Bhutanam Raja. Not what overlord of all. We'll just translate this today, and tomorrow, for me tomorrow, for you later today, we will see the meaning of it in detail. Sarvesham Bhutanam Raja, the king of all the elements and those that have come out of the 5 elements, the elemental beings, the king. Why is it called king here? Because that overlordship is talked about here. That is where the rub is. One wants to be limitless by having that overlordship or being connected to that overlordship. And so then a very beautiful imagery, which also occurs in the Mundakopanishad, is given. How is this Adhipati? Adhipatyam means this overlordship, and this Raja, this king. How does this king, what can this king be compared to? How does the overlordship unfold? What can it be compared to? A beautiful metaphor, like I said, which is also in the Mundakopanishad, is given. Tadyatha rathana bhaucha rathane maucha araha sarve samarpita. Rathanabhi means the hub of the wheel of a chariot. And the nemi means the, what is that called? The spokes. The spokes of the wheel. Because see, for the wheel to move, there must be something connecting the tire. Whether that tire is made of wood or rubber, whatever it is. In the olden days, it was wooden wheels, but that circular piece of wood, in order to connect it to the hub, there have to be spokes. I think they're called felloes or something like that. Felloes, felloes. So then, just like the hub collects and is the place of refuge, ashraya, for all the spokes, likewise, evameva asmin atmani, in this atma, all the elements, all the beings, all the devas, all the celestials, all the lokas, and all the lokas means comfortable lokas, uncomfortable lokas, everything, all the pranis, everything that breathes, everything that is alive, everything take refuge and are outsourced from that hub of power, of authority, and of overlordship. And that also is talked about as I am Atma. That is Ishvara here. And this Lakshana is called Tatastha Lakshana. Tatastha means, a temporary definition. In relation to the manifest universe, this definition operates. How? We shall see all that in the next satsang. Thank you. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.